Margaret Whitmore walked into the music room at Harmony Arts Academy like she owned the place. In many ways, she did. For 15 long years, she had been the best piano teacher at this fancy school. Students came from all over the city to learn. From her, their parents paid big money for her lessons. The music room was perfect. Everything had its place. The black grand piano sat in the center like a king on his throne. Margaret had fought hard to get this piano. It cost more than most people made in a year. She cleaned it herself every morning before her first student arrived. No one else was allowed to touch it. Margaret looked at her watch. It was 7 in the morning. Her first student would come at 8. She had 1 hour to get ready. She opened her bag and took out her lesson books. Each book was covered in plastic. To keep it clean, she put them on the music stand in perfect order. The morning sun came through the tall windows. It made the piano shine like a mirror. Margaret smiled. This was her kingdom. Here, she made the rules. Students did what she said, or they could find another teacher. She walked to the piano and sat on the bench. Her fingers touched the keys softly. She played a few notes to check if the piano was in tune. It was perfect, just like everything else. In her room, Margaret thought about her day. She had 8 students coming. All of them were from rich families. Their parents drove expensive cars and wore nice clothes. They lived in big houses with swimming pools. These were the kind of people Margaret liked to teach. She did not teach just anyone. If a family could not pay her high prices, she would say no. If a student was not serious about music, she would say no. If parents did not respect her rules, she would say no. Margaret Whitmore was very picky about her students. At 8 o'clock sharp, her first student walked in. It was Emily Chun, a 12-year-old girl whose father owned 3 restaurants in the city. Emily wore a clean white dress and shiny black shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore," Emily said politely. "Good morning, Emily. Sit down and show me your scales," Margaret said in her serious voice. Emily sat at the piano and began to play. Her fingers moved up and down the keys like she had practiced many times. Margaret listened carefully. She heard one small mistake. "Stop," Margaret said firmly. "Your left hand is too slow. Play it again." Emily's face turned red, but she played the scales again. This time it was better. "Good. Now show me the piece you practiced this week," Margaret said. Emily opened her music book and began to play a song by Mozart. It was a difficult piece for a 12-year-old. Margaret had given it to her on purpose. She believed in challenging her students. As Emily played, Margaret walked around the piano. She watched every finger movement. She listened to every note. When Emily made a mistake, Margaret would tap her pencil on the music stand. The sound made Emily nervous, which made her make more mistakes. "Your timing is off," Margaret said when Emily finished. "You must practice more. I expect better next week." Emily nodded and packed up her music. She looked sad as she left the room. This was how Margaret taught. She was tough and demanding. She believed that being nice would not make good musicians. She had learned this way when she was young, and it had worked for her. Margaret's next student was James Parker, a 16-year-old boy whose mother was a layer. James was talented but lazy. He did not practice enough, and Margaret often got angry with him. "Did you practice every day this week?" Margaret asked as James sat down. "Yes, Miss Whitmore," James lied. He had only practiced 3 times. "Prove it. Play the Chopin piece," Margaret said. James began to play, but it was clear he had not practiced much. His fingers stumbled over the hard parts. He forgot some notes completely. Margaret stopped him after 2 minutes. "This is terrible, James. You think you can fool me? I have been teaching piano for 15 years. I know when a student has not practiced." James looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitmore. I had a lot of homework this week." "Homework is not an excuse," Margaret said coldly. "If you want to be a pianist, music must come first. If you cannot do that, perhaps you should find a different hobby." James spent the rest of his lesson playing scales and simple exercises. Margaret made him repeat each one until it was perfect. By the end of the lesson, his hands were tired and his confidence was broken. This pattern continued all day. Student after student came to learn from Margaret. Some were good, some were not so good, but all of them left feeling like they had not done enough. Margaret believed this would make them work harder. At 6 o'clock, Margaret's last student left. She was tired but satisfied. She had maintained her high standards. She had pushed her students to be better. This was what made her the best piano teacher in the city. Margaret began to clean up her room. She put her books back in her bag. She wiped down the piano keys with a special cloth. She adjusted the bench to the perfect height for tomorrow's first student. As she got ready to leave, Margaret looked around her music room one more time. Everything was perfect. The piano was clean and shiny. The music stands were straight. The chairs were in the right places. This room was her life's work. Margaret turned off the lights and locked the door. She walked down the long hallway toward the exit. The academy was quiet now. All the other teachers had gone home. The students were probably at home practicing, or at least she hoped they were outside. Margaret got into her car and drove home to her apartment. She lived alone with her cat, Beethoven. She had never married or had children. Music was her only love. Teaching piano was her only purpose. At home, Margaret made herself dinner and sat down to plan tomorrow's lessons. She would be just as demanding tomorrow as she had been today. She would accept nothing less than perfection from her students. This was the Margaret Whitmore way, and she was proud of it. She did not know that soon everything would change. She did not know that a quiet woman who cleaned the floors would teach her the most important lesson of her life. Rosa Martinez walked through the front door of Harmony Arts Academy at 7 o'clock in the evening. She carried a bucket full of cleaning supplies in one hand and a mop in the other. Her uniform was simple, blue pants and a blue shirt with her name written on a small patch. Her black hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore comfortable shoes for walking on hard floors all night. This was Rosa's second job. During the day, she worked at a restaurant washing dishes and cleaning tables. At night, she cleaned the music academy. She worked 7 days a week to make enough money to pay rent and buy food for her family. Rosa was tired, but she did not complain. She was grateful to have work. Many people in her situation had no job at all. She sent most of her money back home to help her mother and younger sister. What was left barely paid for her small apartment and simple meals. The academy was very different from the restaurant where she worked during the day. The restaurant was loud and busy and full of cooking smells. The academy was quiet and elegant. The floors were made of shiny wood. The walls were painted in soft colors. Beautiful paintings hung in gold frames. Rosa started her work in the main hallway. She swept the floor first, picking up any small pieces of paper or dust. Then she mopped with warm, soapy water. The floor had to be perfect. The academy's students and teachers expected everything to be clean when they arrived in the morning. As Rosa worked, she could hear sounds coming from different rooms. Some students stayed late for practice. She heard piano music from one room, violin music from another. Sometimes she heard singing. The sounds were beautiful, but Rosa tried not to listen too closely. She was here to work, not to enjoy the music. Rosa had been working at the academy for 3 weeks. In that time, she had learned the schedule of every teacher and student. She knew which rooms got dirty quickly and which ones stayed clean. She knew where students liked to eat snacks and drop crumbs. She knew which bathrooms needed extra attention. Most of the teachers ignored Rosa completely. They walked past her as if she was invisible. A few said hello, but most did not even look at her. Rosa did not mind. She was used to being invisible. It made her job easier when people did not notice her. The students were different. Some were polite and said good evening when they saw her. Others acted like she did not exist. A few looked at her with curiosity, as if they wondered what her life was like. But none of them ever tried to talk to her. Rosa understood why they acted this way. She cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. They learned music and performed on stage. Their worlds were very different. She did not expect them to be friends with her. Tonight, Rosa worked her way down the main hallway toward the music rooms. This was always her favorite part of the job. Even though the rooms were empty, they still felt full of music. The air seemed to hold the memory of all the songs that had been played during the day. Rosa pushed her cart to the first music room and opened the door. Inside was a small piano and 4 chairs arranged in a circle. Music sheets were scattered on the floor. Students had been practicing together here. Rosa picked up the papers and put them in a neat pile on the piano. She swept the floor carefully around the piano legs. These instruments were expensive and delicate. Rosa had been warned many times to be careful around them. She was not allowed to touch the keys or move the pianos. She could only clean around them. The second music room was bigger. It had a piano and space for a small orchestra. Rosa found candy wrappers under the chairs and pencil marks on the wall. She cleaned everything carefully. The academy had to look perfect for tomorrow's students. The third room was where the violin lessons happened. Rosa could tell because of the rosin dust on the floor. Violin players used rosin on their bows, and it left a fine powder everywhere. Rosa swept it up and mopped the floor until it shined. As Rosa worked, she thought about her life back home. She had left her country 2 years ago to find better work. She missed her family every day, but she knew she was doing the right thing. The money she sent home helped pay for her sister's school and her mother's medicine. Before she came to America, Rosa had worked in an office. She wore nice clothes and sat at a desk all day. But there was no future there. No matter how hard she worked, she could not make enough money to help her family. So she made the difficult choice to leave everything behind and start over. Learning English had been hard. Rosa studied at night after her first job ended. She practiced with other workers who were also learning. Slowly, she got better. She could understand most of what people said to her now, even though she was still shy about speaking. Rosa pushed her cart to the next room. This was a practice room for advanced students. The piano here was bigger and more beautiful than the others. Rosa had heard that it cost more than most people made in 5 years. She was extra careful as she cleaned around it. Sometimes Rosa wondered what it would be like to play one of these pianos. She had loved music when she was young, but her family could not afford lessons. She taught herself to play simple songs on an old keyboard that her cousin gave her. But that was a long time ago, in a different life. Rosa finished cleaning the practice rooms and moved on to the bigger performance spaces. These rooms had stages where students gave concerts for their families. Rosa imagined what it must feel like to stand on that stage and play beautiful music for an audience. The largest room had a grand piano that was even more impressive than the others. It was black and shiny like a mirror. Rosa could see her reflection in its surface as she cleaned the floor around it. She was careful not to let her mop touch the piano legs. As Rosa worked, she found herself humming quietly. It was a song her mother used to sing when Rosa was little. The melody was simple and sweet. Rosa had not hummed in a long time. Something about being around all this music made her remember the joy she used to feel when she heard beautiful songs. Rosa looked at her watch. It was almost midnight. She had been working for 5 hours and still had 2 more hours to go. Her feet hurt and her back was sore from bending over to clean. But she pushed forward. This job was important. Her family was counting on the money she earned. Rosa gathered her supplies and moved to the next section of the academy. She had administrative offices to clean, then bathrooms, and finally the kitchen area where students sometimes ate lunch. Every night was the same routine, but Rosa did not mind. Routine was comfortable. It helped her not think too much about how far she was from home. As she worked, Rosa dreamed about the future. Maybe someday she would save enough money to bring her sister to America. Maybe they could both find better jobs and build a good life together. Maybe Rosa could even take English classes at the community college and learn new skills. For now, though, Rosa was content to work hard and send money home. She was grateful for these 2 jobs, even though they were difficult. She was grateful for her small apartment, even though it was lonely. She was grateful to be in America, even though she missed home every day. Rosa did not know that her life was about to change. She did not know that the beautiful music around her would soon become part of her story. She simply continued to work, invisible and quiet, making everything clean for tomorrow's students and teachers. Rosa had been working at Harmony Arts Academy for 2 months when something began to change inside her. Every night as she cleaned the music rooms, she found herself staying a little longer than necessary. The piano seemed to call to her there. Black and white keys looking like old friends she had not seen in years. At first, Rosa only looked at the pianos while she worked. She would clean around them very carefully, making sure not to touch anything she was not supposed to touch. But as the weeks went by, she found herself moving closer and closer to the instruments. One night, Rosa was cleaning the small practice room where beginning students had their lessons. The piano was not as grand as the others, but it was still beautiful. Rosa finished mopping the floor and was putting her supplies away. When she noticed that someone had left a music book open on the piano, Rosa walked closer to look at the book. The pages were filled with black dots and lines that she remembered from long ago, musical notes. She had learned to read them when she was young, but that felt like a lifetime ago now. The song on the open page was simple. Rosa could tell because there were not many notes and they were spread far apart. She found herself humming the melody just by looking at the written music. Her fingers moved in the air as if she was playing an invisible piano. Rosa looked around the empty room. The academy was quiet. Everyone had gone home hours ago. The security guard was probably asleep at his desk in the front lobby. No one would know if she just touched one key. Just one dot. Rosa reached out slowly and pressed the middle C key. The sound was pure and beautiful. It filled the small room and seemed to hang in the air for a long moment. Rosa smiled. She had forgotten how wonderful a real piano could sound. The next night, Rosa found herself thinking about that single note all day at her restaurant job. As she washed dishes and cleaned tables, she remembered the clear, sweet sound of the piano key. When she arrived at the academy that evening, she finished her regular cleaning work as quickly as possible. When she reached the small practice room, Rosa looked around carefully to make sure she was alone. Then she walked to the piano and pressed the same key again. This time she pressed a few other keys too. She played a simple scale, just 5 notes going up and then back down. The sound was like magic. Rosa closed her eyes, and for a moment she was not a tired woman cleaning floors. In a music academy. She was young again, sitting at her cousin's old keyboard, discovering the joy of making music with her own hands. From that night on, Rosa began to spend a few extra minutes in each music room. She would finish her cleaning work, and then, if she was sure no one was around, she would touch the piano keys. At first, she only played simple scales and single notes. But slowly, her confidence grew. Rosa remembered more and more songs from her childhood. Her mother had sung lullabies to her when she was small. Her grandmother had taught her folk songs from their home country. Rosa found that her fingers still remembered how to find these melodies on the piano keys. She was very careful to keep her secret. Rosa only played when she was completely sure she was alone. She played very softly so the sound would not travel far. She always made sure to clean the piano keys afterward with her cleaning cloth, removing any fingerprints she might have left. Rosa knew she was taking a risk. If anyone caught her playing the pianos, she would probably lose her job. These instruments were expensive and precious. They were not meant for someone like her to touch. But Rosa could not help herself. The music filled an empty place in her heart that she had not even realized was there. As the weeks passed, Rosa grew bolder. She began to remember more complex pieces of music. Songs she had heard on the radio years ago came back to her. Melodies from movies and television shows that she had loved. Her fingers found ways to play these songs on the piano keys. Rosa discovered that each piano in the academy had its own personality. The small piano in the practice room had a bright, cheerful sound. The larger piano in the advanced students' room had a deeper, richer tone. The grand piano in the concert hall had a voice that could whisper softly or sing with great power. Late at night, after all her cleaning was done, Rosa would sometimes sit at one of the pianos for 10 or 15 minutes. She would play the songs that lived in her memory. These were the happiest moments of her week. For these few minutes, she was not just a cleaning woman. She was a musician again. Rosa began to notice things about the academy that she had not seen before. She watched how the students held their hands when they played. She listened to how the teachers explained difficult passages. Even though she was supposed to be invisible, Rosa was learning just by being around so much music education. One night, Rosa found a piece of sheet music that a student had dropped on the floor. It was a beautiful song by Chopin, a composer Rosa remembered from her youth. The music was more complex than anything she had tried to play since starting her secret piano sessions. Rosa took the sheet music home with her that night. In her small apartment, she studied the notes carefully. She hummed the melody and moved her fingers as if she was playing. She had no piano at home, so she could only practice in her imagination. The next night at work, Rosa brought the sheet music back with her. After finishing her cleaning duties, she went to the grand piano in the concert hall. She placed the music on the piano stand and began to play very softly. At first, Rosa's fingers stumbled over the difficult passages. It had been so long since she had read complex music, but slowly the old skills came back to her. Her hands remembered how to stretch across the keys. Her eyes remembered how to read the notes quickly. Playing this beautiful piece of music was like coming home after a long journey. Rosa felt tears in her eyes as the melody flowed from her fingers. She had forgotten how music could touch her soul and make her feel alive. Rosa was so lost in the music that she did not hear the footsteps in the hallway. She did not see the security guard walk past the door. She did not notice the custodian, who sometimes worked late shifts, peek into the room. For these precious moments, Rosa was completely herself. Not the quiet cleaning woman who tried to be invisible. Not the tired immigrant working 2 jobs to survive. She was Rosa the musician, Rosa who could make beautiful sounds with her hands. Rosa who understood the language of music that speaks to every human heart. When Rosa finished playing the Chopin piece, she sat quietly at the piano for a moment. The last notes seemed to hang in the air like a blessing. She carefully put the sheet music back where she had found it, and cleaned the piano keys with her cloth. As Rosa gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to move on to the next room, she made a decision. She would continue to find these moments of music in her work nights. The pianos were calling to her, and she could no longer ignore their call. Rosa did not know that her secret would not stay hidden much longer. She did not know that someone had already noticed her late-night concerts. She simply continued her work, carrying the joy of music in her heart and counting the hours until she could touch the piano keys again. Margaret Whitmore was having a terrible day. Her most talented student had just quit to focus on sports instead of music. A parent had complained about her teaching methods. And worst of all, she had forgotten her car keys and had to take a taxi back to the academy at 9 o'clock at night to get them. Margaret walked through the front door of Harmony Arts Academy feeling frustrated and angry. The security guard let her in without asking questions. Everyone knew who Margaret Whitmore was and that she sometimes came back after hours for forgotten items or late preparations. The academy was dark and quiet. Margaret's high heels clicked loudly on the wooden floors as she walked toward her music room. She was thinking about all the problems in her life and not paying attention to anything around her. But as Margaret got closer to the music rooms, she heard something that made her stop walking. It was piano music. Someone was playing one of the academy's pianos after hours. This was not allowed. Only teachers with special permission could use the practice rooms at night. Margaret felt her anger growing stronger. Who would dare to use her precious instruments without permission? She walked quietly toward the sound, her footsteps silent on the carpet that covered this part of the hallway. The music was coming from the largest practice room, the one with the beautiful grand piano that Margaret loved most. As she got closer, Margaret could hear that whoever was playing was very skilled. The piece was complex and difficult, but that did not matter. Rules were rules. Margaret reached the doorway and looked inside. What she saw made her so angry that her hands began to shake. The cleaning woman was sitting at her precious piano. The janitor was playing Margaret's most treasured instrument with her dirty hands. For a moment, Margaret was too shocked to move. Then her anger exploded like a volcano. She marched into the room and shouted at the top of her voice, "What do you think you are doing? Rosa jumped up from the piano bench so quickly that she almost fell down. Her face turned pale with fear. She had been caught. Her secret was discovered. And the person who caught her was the most demanding and frightening teacher in the whole academy. I'm sorry, Rosa said in her quiet voice. Her English was not perfect, especially when she was scared. I was just I was cleaning and Cleaning? Margaret's voice was loud and harsh. You were not cleaning. You were playing my piano with your filthy hands. How dare you touch this instrument? Rosa looked down at her hands. They were clean. She always washed them carefully before touching the piano keys. But she could not say this to the angry teacher. She could only stand there feeling ashamed and afraid. This piano costs more money than you will make in 10 years, Margaret continued shouting. It is not a toy for cleaning people to play with. It is a serious instrument for serious musicians. I am sorry, Rosa repeated. She wanted to explain that she loved music, that she had been careful, that she meant no harm. But the words would not come. Margaret's anger was too frightening. Sorry is not enough, Margaret said coldly. You are here to clean floors and empty trash cans. You are not here to pretend you are a musician. Stick to mopping floors and stay away from things you cannot possibly understand. These words hit Rosa like a slap in the face. Margaret was telling her that she was too stupid to understand music, that she was just a cleaning woman who should know her place, that she had no right to dream of making beautiful sounds. Rosa felt tears starting in her eyes, but she forced them not to fall. She would not cry in front of this cruel woman. She gathered what was left of her dignity and spoke as clearly as she could. I understand. I will not touch the piano again. I am very sorry for the trouble. You better be sorry, Margaret said. Her voice was still angry, but she was starting to feel satisfied that she had put the cleaning woman in her place. If I ever catch you touching any instrument in this academy again, I will make sure you lose your job immediately. Rosa nodded and began to gather her cleaning supplies. Her hands were shaking as she put her mop and bucket back on her cart. She wanted to leave this room as quickly as possible and never see Margaret Whitmore again, but Margaret was not finished. She followed Rosa as the cleaning woman pushed her cart toward the door. I cannot believe the nerve of some people, Margaret said, her voice full of disgust. Do you think because you heard some music that you can just sit down and play like you belong here? This is a place for educated people who have studied music for years. Rosa stopped pushing her cart and turned around. For just a moment, Margaret saw something flash in the cleaning woman's eyes. It was not fear or shame. It was something else. Something that looked almost like disappointment, but the moment passed quickly. Rosa looked down again and continued, pushing her cart out of the room. Remember what I said? Margaret called after her. Stick to what you know. Clean the floors and leave the music to people who understand it. Rosa disappeared down the hallway without looking back. Margaret stood alone in the practice room, feeling pleased with herself. She had protected her precious piano from someone who did not deserve to touch it. She had maintained the standards of the academy. Margaret walked to the piano and examined it carefully. She looked for any damage the cleaning woman might have caused. She checked for fingerprints or scratches. But the piano looked perfect. In fact, it looked cleaner than usual. Margaret sat down at the piano bench and played a few notes. The piano sounded fine. In fact, it sounded better than fine. It sounded beautiful. Whoever had been playing it had not heard it at all. For just a moment, Margaret remembered the music she had heard as she walked down the hallway. It had been quite good, actually. The cleaning woman had real skill, but Margaret pushed this thought away quickly. It did not matter how well the woman could play. She was still just a janitor who had no business touching expensive instruments. Margaret found her car keys on the small table where she had left them. She gathered them up and prepared to leave. As she walked back down the hallway, she felt satisfied that she had handled the situation properly, but as Margaret drove home that night, she could not stop thinking about what had happened. Something about the whole situation bothered her. Though she could not figure out what it was, The cleaning woman had seemed genuinely sorry. She had not argued or made excuses. She had accepted Margaret's scolding with quiet dignity, and the music Margaret had heard, it really had been quite beautiful. Margaret shook her head and forced herself to think about other things. She had done the right thing. The academy had rules for a reason. Cleaning people should clean and musicians should make music. That was the natural order of things. But deep down, in a place Margaret did not want to look, she felt a small, uncomfortable feeling. It was not quite guilt, but it was not satisfaction either. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. Margaret arrived home and went to bed, but sleep did not come easily. She kept hearing the beautiful piano music in her mind. She kept seeing the look in the cleaning woman's eyes when she told her to stick to mopping floors, but Margaret was too proud to admit she might have been wrong. She convinced herself that she had done what any responsible teacher would do. She had protected the academy's property and maintained proper standards. Rosa, meanwhile, finished her work that night in complete silence. She did not hum any songs. She did not look at any of the pianos as she cleaned around them. She did her job quickly and efficiently and left the academy as soon as possible. At home in her small apartment, Rosa sat on her bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she had been caught or because she might lose her job. She cried because of the words Margaret had said. Stick to things you cannot possibly understand. Rosa knew she understood music. She understood it in her heart and in her soul. But Margaret had made her feel small and stupid and worthless. Rosa had worked so hard to maintain her dignity in this new country, and in one moment it had been taken away from her. Neither woman slept well that night. Neither one knew that. This confrontation would change both of their lives forever. 3 weeks had passed since Margaret caught Rosa playing the piano. In those 3 weeks, Rosa had not touched a single key. She did her cleaning work quickly and quietly, keeping her eyes down and her hands busy with mops and rags. The music. Rooms felt cold and empty to her now. Like beautiful gardens she was not allowed to enter. Margaret had almost forgotten about the incident. She was busy preparing her students for the academy's biggest event of the year, the annual fundraising talent show. This show brought together wealthy donors who supported the academy with their money. It was very important that everything went perfectly. The talent show was scheduled for Friday night. Margaret had 3 of her best students performing. She had spent weeks helping them prepare their pieces. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail, but on Thursday afternoon, disaster struck. Margaret was in her office when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Chun, Emily's mother. Miss Whitmore, I have terrible news, Mrs. Chun said. Her voice sounded worried. Emily fell off her bicycle this morning. She broke her wrist. The doctor says she cannot play piano for at least 6 weeks. Margaret felt her heart sink. Emily was supposed to play a beautiful piece by Mozart. She was one of the stars of the show. Many people were coming specifically to hear her perform. I am so sorry, Miss Whitmore, Mrs. Chun continued. We know how important this show is. Emily is very upset that she cannot perform. Margaret hung up the phone and put her head in her hands. This was a disaster. The show was tomorrow night, and now she had a big empty space in the program. She could not ask another student to learn a new piece in one day. That was impossible. Margaret spent the rest of Thursday trying to find a solution. She called other music teachers to see if they had students who could perform. She looked through her list of former students who might be available. But everyone she called was either too busy or not ready to perform in front of such an important audience. By Thursday night, Margaret was desperate. She had to tell Dr. Harrison, the academy's director, that they had a problem. Dr. Harrison was a kind man in his 60s who had run the academy for 20 years. He cared more about music education than about making money, but he also understood that the academy needed donors to survive. This is a problem, Dr. Harrison said when Margaret explained the situation. The Johnsons are coming specifically to hear Emily play. They were thinking about making a large donation to buy new instruments. I know, Margaret said miserably. I have tried everything I can think of. There is just no time to prepare another student. Dr. Harrison thought for a moment. What if we just make the program shorter? We could add some speaking time between the other performances. Margaret shook her head. The program is already quite short. If we make it any shorter, people will feel like they did not get their money's worth. Friday evening arrived, and Margaret felt sick with worry. The Academy's main auditorium was filled with well-dressed people who had paid a lot of money to attend this show. Margaret stood backstage with her students, trying to look calm while her stomach churned with nervousness. Dr. Harrison walked to the podium to welcome the audience. He was wearing his best suit and his biggest smile, but Margaret could see the worry in his eyes. "Welcome to Harmony Arts Academy's annual talent showcase," Dr. Harrison announced. "Tonight you will hear some of the most talented young musicians in our city." The show began with James playing a piece by Bach. He did well, though Margaret noticed a few small mistakes. The audience clapped politely. Next came Sarah, a violinist who played a beautiful melody by Vivaldi. She was nervous and her hands shook slightly, but she made it through the piece without any major problems. Then it was time for the gap. Where Emily was supposed to perform, Dr. Harrison walked back to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a small change in tonight's program," he announced. Margaret held her breath. "One of our performers is unable to join us tonight due to a minor injury. We are going to take a short intermission while we prepare for our final piece." Margaret could see some people in the audience looking confused. Others checked their watches. The Johnsons, the wealthy couple who might donate money for new instruments, whispered to each other and looked disappointed. During the intermission, Margaret paced back and forth backstage. This was turning into a disaster. The audience was losing interest. The donors were getting restless. The Academy's reputation was at stake. Dr. Harrison came backstage looking worried. "Margaret, we need to do something. People are starting to leave. Mrs. Johnson just asked me if this was all there was to the show." Margaret felt panic rising in her chest. "I do not know what to do. There is no one else who can perform." Dr. Harrison looked around the backstage area desperately. That was when he noticed Rosa. She was standing quietly in the corner holding a trash bag. She had been emptying the waste baskets backstage when the intermission began. "Rosa!" Dr. Harrison called out. He had always been kind to the Academy's staff members. "You work here every night. You must hear a lot of music. Do you know any songs?" Rosa looked surprised that anyone was talking to her. She glanced nervously at Margaret, remembering their terrible encounter 3 weeks ago. I do not understand," Rosa said quietly. Dr. Harrison was getting desperate. "Can you sing? Can you play any instruments? We need someone to fill time." "In our program," Margaret started to protest. "Dr. Harrison, she is just the cleaning woman. She cannot possibly—" But Dr. Harrison held up his hand to stop her. He was looking at Rosa with new interest. "Rosa, I am asking you seriously. Do you have any musical abilities at all?" Rosa looked down at her feet. She thought about the beautiful nights when she had played the Academy's pianos. She thought about the songs her mother had taught her. She thought about the joy she felt when music flowed from her fingers, but she also remembered Margaret's harsh words, "Stick to mopping floors and stay away from things you cannot possibly understand." The auditorium was quiet now. Margaret could hear people talking and moving around. Some were probably leaving. The Academy's most important fundraising event was falling apart. Dr. Harrison looked at Rosa with pleading eyes. "Please, Rosa, if you can do anything at all to help us, we would be very grateful." Rosa looked at Margaret, then at Dr. Harrison, then at the floor. She thought about her family back home who needed the money she sent them. She thought about how much this job meant to her. She thought about all the risks of saying yes, but she also thought about the music that lived in her heart. The music that Margaret had told her she could not possibly understand. Finally, Rosa looked up and spoke in a voice so quiet that Dr. Harrison had to lean forward to hear her. "I could play piano if you want, but I do not have any music prepared." Margaret's mouth fell open in shock. Dr. Harrison's eyes lit up with hope. "You can play piano?" Dr. Harrison asked. "Are you sure?" Rosa nodded slowly. "Yes, I can play." Margaret found her voice. Dr. Harrison, this is ridiculous. She is the janitor. She cannot perform in front of our donors. But Dr. Harrison was already moving toward the stage. Rosa, would you be willing to play something for our audience? Anything at all? Rosa looked at Margaret one more time. Margaret's face was red with anger and embarrassment, but Dr. Harrison was looking at her with kindness. And Hope. Rosa made a decision that would change everything. Yes, she said simply. I will play. Dr. Harrison led Rosa toward the stage while Margaret followed behind them, her face white with shock and worry. She could not believe what was happening. The Academy's most important event of the year was about to be ruined by the cleaning woman. Dr. Harrison, please think about this, Margaret whispered urgently. What if she cannot really play? What if she embarrasses us in front of all these important people? But Dr. Harrison was desperate. Half the audience had already left during the intermission. The people who remained were getting restless. He had to try something. Rosa, Dr. Harrison said gently as they reached the side of the stage. Are you sure you can do this? These people have paid a lot of money to be here tonight. Rosa nodded, though her hands were shaking. I will try my best. Dr. Harrison walked back to the podium while Rosa waited in the wings. Margaret stood beside her, still unable to believe this was really happening. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Harrison announced to the audience, please welcome back to your seats. We have a special surprise performance for you tonight. People slowly returned to their seats, though many looked skeptical. Margaret could see the Johnsons in the third row, checking their watches again. Tonight, we are honored to have a performance by Rosa Martinez, Dr. Harrison continued. Rosa is a valued member of our Academy family. Margaret watched in horror as Rosa walked onto the stage. She was still wearing her cleaning uniform, blue pants and a blue shirt with her name patch. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tiny and out of place on the big stage, the audience murmured in confusion. These wealthy people had come to hear talented students from good families. They had not expected to see the cleaning woman performing. Rosa walked to the grand piano in the center of the stage. It was the same type of piano that Margaret had caught her playing 3 weeks ago. Rosa sat down on the bench and adjusted it to the right height. For a moment, Rosa sat completely still. The auditorium was quiet except for the sound of people whispering to each other. Margaret held her breath. What if Rosa froze up? What if she could not play after all? Then Rosa placed her hands on the piano keys. She began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. Very few people could play it well, even professional musicians. The first notes filled the auditorium like magic. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys with perfect precision and incredible grace. Every note was clear and pure. The melody soared and danced and whispered and sang. Margaret felt her knees go weak. This was not simple playing. This was not someone who had learned a few songs by ear. This was masterful, professional-level piano performance. The audience stopped, whispering. People who had been looking at their phones put them away. Everyone in the auditorium was suddenly paying complete attention to the small woman in the cleaning uniform who was making impossible, beautiful music. Rosa played with her eyes closed, lost in the music. Her whole body moved with the rhythm of the piece. Her fingers flew over the keys like they were dancing. She played the gentle parts with tender softness and the powerful parts with magnificent strength. Margaret had heard this piece played by concert pianists on recordings. She had heard her own advanced students attempt it, but she had never heard it played with such emotion and technical perfection as Rosa was playing it. Right now, the music told a story without words. It spoke of love and loss, of dreams and disappointment, of hope and heartbreak. Rosa poured her entire soul into every note. She played not just with her fingers, but with her heart. As the piece built toward its dramatic climax, Rosa's hands moved faster and faster across the keys. The music became a storm of sound that filled every corner of the auditorium. Then suddenly it became soft and gentle again, like rain after thunder. Margaret looked out at the audience. Every person was completely still, listening with their whole being. The Johnsons were leaning forward in their seats, their mouths slightly open in amazement. Other donors had tears in their eyes. Rosa played the final passages of the ballade with heartbreaking beauty. The melody became quieter and quieter, like a whispered goodbye. The last notes hung in the air like a blessing when Rosa finished playing. She sat still for a moment with her hands resting on the keys. The auditorium was completely silent. Then the applause began. It started with one person clapping, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding louder than Margaret had ever heard at any academy event. People were cheering and wiping tears from their eyes. Rosa stood up from the piano bench and looked out at the audience in surprise. She had not expected this reaction. She had simply played a piece of music that she loved. The applause continued for several minutes. Rosa bowed shyly and started to walk off the stage, but the audience kept clapping and calling for more. Dr. Harrison hurried onto the stage with a huge smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, Rosa Martinez," he announced, gesturing toward Rosa. The applause grew even louder. Margaret watched from the side of the stage, her mind spinning with confusion and shock. How was this possible? How could the cleaning woman play like a professional concert pianist? Finally, the applause died down and Rosa left the stage. Dr. Harrison quickly introduced the final student performer, but it was clear that everyone was still thinking about Rosa's incredible performance. When the show ended, people crowded around. Dr. Harrison asking about Rosa. Who was she? Where had she studied? Why was she working as a cleaning woman if she could play like that? Dr. Harrison did not know the answers to any of these questions. He found Rosa backstage, putting on her cleaning uniform jacket and preparing to go back to work. "Rosa," Dr. Harrison said, his voice full of amazement, "that was the most beautiful piano performance I have ever heard in this auditorium. Where did you learn to play like that?" Rosa looked down at her hands. "I learned when I was young in my home country, but that was a long time ago." Margaret finally found her voice. She walked up to Rosa, her face pale and her hands shaking. I had no idea," Margaret said quietly. "Rosa, I owe you an apology. I said terrible things to you. I told you that you could not understand music. I was completely wrong." Rosa looked at Margaret with sad eyes. "It is okay, Miss Whitmore, you did not know." But Margaret knew it was not okay. She had judged Rosa based on her job and her appearance. She had been cruel and dismissive to someone who was clearly a gifted musician. The Johnsons appeared backstage, still looking amazed by what they had heard. "Dr. Harrison," Mrs. Johnson said excitedly, "we had no idea you had such talent here at the Academy. That performance was absolutely magnificent. We would like to discuss making a very large donation." "Doctor." Harrison beamed with relief and joy. Rosa's performance had not only saved the evening, it had made it the most successful fundraising event in the Academy's history. But as Margaret watched Rosa quietly gather her cleaning supplies and return to work, she felt a deep shame in her heart. She had almost prevented this miracle from happening. Her prejudice and cruelty had nearly robbed the world of witnessing Rosa's incredible gift. Margaret realized that she had learned something important tonight. She had learned that talent and worth were not determined by someone's job or social status. She had learned that her assumptions about people could be completely wrong. Most importantly, she had learned that Rosa Martinez was not just a cleaning woman. She was a true artist who had been hiding in plain sight. The next morning, Margaret could not stop thinking about Rosa's performance. She had barely slept all night, replaying every note in her mind. She kept seeing Rosa's face as she played, the joy and pain and beauty that had flowed through her. Music. Margaret arrived at the Academy early and went straight to Dr. Harrison's office. She found him sitting at his desk, reading emails and smiling broadly. "Margaret," Dr. Harrison said when he saw her, "can you believe what happened last night? I've already received calls from 3 major donors who want to give money to the Academy. And it is all because of Rosa's incredible performance." Margaret sat down across from Dr. Harrison's desk. "We need to talk about Rosa," she said seriously. Doctor. Harrison nodded. I completely agree. We cannot let talent like that go to waste. I have been thinking about this all morning. Rosa should be teaching here, not cleaning floors. Margaret felt relief that Dr. Harrison understood the situation, but she also felt the heavy weight of her own guilt. Dr. Harrison, I need to tell you something, Margaret said quietly. 3 weeks ago, I caught Rosa playing piano after hours. I was terrible to her. I told her to stick to mopping floors and stay away from music. I said she could not possibly understand it. Dr. Harrison's smile faded. Oh, Margaret, what did you do? Margaret felt tears starting in her eyes. I was so wrong. I judged her because she is the cleaning woman. I thought someone in her position could not be a real musician. I was cruel and prejudiced. Dr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. This explains a lot, he finally said. When I asked Rosa to perform last night, she looked terrified. She kept glancing at you like she was afraid you would stop her. I almost did stop her, Margaret admitted. I tried to convince you not to let her play. I was worried she would embarrass the academy. Dr. Harrison shook his head sadly. Margaret, I am disappointed in you. That is not the kind of behavior I expect from our faculty members. Margaret nodded, accepting the criticism she deserved. I know I want to make this right, but I do not know how. Dr. Harrison thought for a moment. The first step is to find out more about Rosa's background. There is clearly a story here that we do not know. That afternoon, Dr. Harrison asked Rosa to come to his office. She arrived looking nervous, still wearing her cleaning uniform and carrying her bucket of supplies. Rosa, please sit down, Dr. Harrison said gently. I want to talk to you about last night. Rosa sat on the edge of the chair, ready to run if necessary. Did I do something wrong? I know I should not have played the piano. I will not do it again. No, Rosa, Dr. Harrison said quickly. You did nothing wrong. Your performance was beautiful. I want to know more about your musical background. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. She had kept her past secret for so long that it felt strange to talk about it. I studied piano at the National Conservatory in my home country, Rosa finally said. I graduated with highest honors. I performed with the National Symphony Orchestra twice. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened. Rosa, that is incredible. The National Conservatory is one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. How did you end up here working as a cleaning woman? Rosa's voice became very quiet. My country's economy collapsed. There were no jobs for musicians. My family needed money for food and medicine. I came to America to find work, any work that would help them survive. But surely you could have found work as a music teacher here, Dr. Harrison said. Rosa shook her head. My degrees are not recognized in America. I would need to go back to school for years and take many tests. I do not have money for that. I barely have money for rent and food. What about performing? You could give concerts. I have tried, Rosa said sadly. But no one takes me seriously. They look at my clothes and hear my accent, and they think I am not good enough. It is easier to be invisible and clean floors than to face that rejection over and over. Dr. Harrison felt his heart breaking for this talented woman who had been forced to hide her gifts. Rosa, would you be willing to let me help you? I know people in the music world. I could arrange auditions, help you get recognition. Rosa looked hopeful for a moment, then her face fell. What about my job here? I need this work to send money home to my family. You would not lose your job, Dr. Harrison assured her. In fact, I want to offer you a better job. Would you be interested in teaching piano here at the academy? Rosa's eyes filled with tears. You would let me teach? Even though I am just the cleaning woman? Rosa, you are not just anything, Dr. Harrison said firmly. You are a gifted musician who deserves respect and recognition. That evening, Dr. Harrison called Margaret into his office again. I've learned Rosa's full story, he said. She is a graduate of one of the world's best music schools. She was a professional concert pianist in her home country. Margaret felt even worse about her behavior. She is probably more qualified to teach here than I am, she said quietly. Perhaps, Dr. Harrison said. But that is not the point. The point is that we have all learned something important about not judging people by their appearance or circumstances. The next day, Dr. Harrison arranged for Rosa to give a small concert for the Academy's faculty and advanced students. Word had spread about her amazing performance at the fundraising show, and everyone was curious to hear her play again. Rosa performed 3 pieces: the Chopin Ballade from the night before, a Bach prelude and fugue, and a piece by a composer from her home country that no one in the audience had ever heard before. The faculty members sat in stunned silence as Rosa played. Her technique was flawless, her interpretation was mature and sophisticated, and her emotional connection to the music was obvious in every note. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Several faculty members had tears in their eyes. Everyone realized they had been working alongside a master musician without knowing it. After the concert, Margaret approached Rosa. She had been practicing what she wanted to say all day. "Rosa, I owe you a sincere apology," Margaret said. "The things I said to you were wrong and hurtful. I judged you unfairly, and I am deeply sorry." Rosa looked at Margaret with kind eyes. "I understand, Miss Whitmore. You did not know my story." That is no excuse," Margaret said. "I should have treated you with respect regardless of what I knew or did not know about your background. You have more grace and dignity than I do." Rosa smiled sadly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." Margaret felt humbled by Rosa's forgiveness. "Is there anything I can do to make up for how I treated you?" Rosa thought for a moment. "You could help me learn about teaching music to American students. I know how to play, but I do not know much about your teaching methods here." Margaret nodded eagerly. "I would be honored to help you in any way I can." Dr. Harrison announced that Rosa would begin teaching part-time at the Academy, while keeping some of her cleaning duties until she could build up a full schedule of students. He also arranged for her to perform at several local venues to help rebuild her performing career. The story of Rosa's talent spread quickly through the city's music community. Soon, reporters wanted to interview her, and concert promoters were calling to book performances. Rosa's life was changing rapidly, but she remained humble and grateful. She never forgot the kindness Dr. Harrison had shown her or the lessons she had taught everyone about the danger of making assumptions about others. Margaret, meanwhile, was learning her own lessons. She began to look at all people differently: her students, the other staff members, and strangers she met on the street. She realized that everyone had a story, and everyone deserved respect and kindness. The Academy had gained not just a talented teacher, but a reminder that true worth comes from within, not from job titles or social status. 6 months later, the Harmony Arts Academy looked very different from the inside, even though the building remained the same. The changes were not in the walls or the floors, but in the hearts and minds of the people who walked through its halls. Rosa Martinez now had her own music room on the 2nd floor. A small gold nameplate on the door read, "Professor Rosa Martinez, Piano Instruction." She taught 15 students and had a waiting list of families hoping to study with her. Word of her incredible talent and gentle teaching style had spread. Throughout the city, Rosa's students loved her because she understood their struggles. She remembered what it felt like to be learning something difficult. She was patient when they made mistakes and encouraging when they felt frustrated. She taught them not just how to play the piano, but how to find joy in music. But Rosa had not forgotten where she came from. 3 evenings a week, she still helped with cleaning duties at the Academy. She said it kept her humble and reminded her to appreciate every opportunity she had been given. Margaret Whitmore had changed the most of anyone. The shame she felt about how she had treated Rosa had forced her to examine her entire life and teaching philosophy. She realized that she had been too harsh and judgmental with everyone, not just Rosa. Margaret began treating her students with more kindness and patience. She still demanded excellence, but she no longer crushed their spirits when they made mistakes. Her students started to enjoy their lessons more, and their playing improved because they were no longer afraid to take risks. Margaret and Rosa had become friends and teaching partners. They often consulted with each other about difficult students or challenging pieces of music. Margaret had learned that Rosa's musical knowledge was deeper than her own in many areas, and she was not too proud to ask for advice. The friendship between the two women was noticed by everyone at the academy. Students saw how Margaret treated Rosa with respect and admiration, and they learned from this example. The academy became a more welcoming place for everyone. Dr. Harrison was thrilled with the changes. The academy's reputation had grown significantly since Rosa's first performance. More talented students wanted to study there, and more wealthy donors wanted to support the school. But more importantly, the academy had become a place where talent was recognized and nurtured regardless of where it came from. One evening in spring, the academy held another fundraising concert. This time, Rosa was scheduled as the featured performer. She wore an elegant black dress that Dr. Harrison had helped her buy, and her hair was styled beautifully. She looked like the professional concert pianist. She had always been inside, but the biggest change was not in Rosa's appearance. It was in how everyone treated her. The donors who had been surprised by her talent 6 months ago now came specifically to hear her play. Other musicians in the city respected her as a colleague. Students looked up to her as a role model. Rosa performed a program of pieces from her home country, music that told the story of her people and her own journey. The audience listened with deep attention and appreciation. When she finished, the applause was long and heartfelt. After the concert, many people came backstage to congratulate Rosa. Among them was a woman Rosa had never met before. "Miss Martinez," the woman said, "my name is Dr. Susan Chung. I am the director of the City Symphony Orchestra. We would like to invite you to perform as a guest soloist with our orchestra next season." Rosa felt tears of joy in her eyes. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about when she first came to America. To perform with a major orchestra was the highest honor a pianist could receive. "I would be honored," Rosa said quietly. Margaret, who had been standing nearby, felt overwhelming pride and happiness for her friend. She remembered the night when she had told Rosa to stick to mopping floors, and she felt grateful that Rosa had been strong enough to rise above such cruelty. As the evening wound down, Margaret found Rosa sitting alone in the academy's main hallway. Looking thoughtful. "Are you okay?" Margaret asked, sitting down beside her. Rosa smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. 6 months ago, I was invisible. People looked right through me as if I did not exist. Now, they see me and appreciate what I can do." "I am sorry I was one of the people who could not see you," Margaret said quietly. Rosa patted Margaret's hand. "You taught me something important that night when you caught me playing piano." Margaret looked surprised. "What could I possibly have taught you? I was terrible to you." "You taught me that I could not hide forever," Rosa said. "Your words hurt, but they also made me realize that I was hiding my true self because I was afraid. When Dr. Harrison asked me to perform, I almost said no. But then I remembered what you said about sticking to things I could not understand. I decided I had to prove, at least to myself, that I did understand music." Margaret felt amazed by Rosa's wisdom and forgiveness. "So something good came from my cruelty?" "Something good can come from any experience if we choose to learn from it," Rosa said. "You learn not to judge people by their appearance. I learned not to hide my gifts because I was afraid of being judged." A year later, Rosa performed with the City Symphony Orchestra to a sold-out audience. Her family came from her home country to hear her play. In the audience were all her students from the academy, Dr. Harrison, and Margaret. As Rosa played the beautiful piano concerto, Margaret thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. She thought about how close she had come to destroying Rosa's chance at recognition. She thought about how much both of their lives had changed because of one difficult night. When the concert ended and Rosa took her bows to thunderous applause, Margaret realized that this was what true success looked like. It was not about being the most demanding teacher or having the most prestigious students. It was about recognizing talent wherever it appeared and helping it grow. Rosa continued to teach at the academy and perform around the world. She brought students from her home country to study in America, giving them the opportunities she had almost missed. She started a scholarship fund for talented students who could not afford lessons. Margaret became known as one of the most compassionate and effective teachers in the city. Her students loved her because she saw their potential and helped them reach it without crushing their spirits. She never again told anyone they could not understand music. The academy flourished and became known as a place where talent was celebrated regardless of its source. The story of Rosa and Margaret became part of the school's history, told to new students and teachers as an example of how people can change and grow. Years later, when people asked Margaret about the most important lesson she had learned in her teaching career, she would always tell them about Rosa. She would explain how a cleaning woman had taught her that true worth is not determined by job titles or social status, but by the gifts we carry in our hearts and the kindness we show to others. And Rosa, whenever she performed on stages around the world, would remember the night when her life changed forever. She would think about the academy where she had been invisible for so long, and the friend who had learned to see her. She would play her music with gratitude for second chances and the power of human dignity to overcome any obstacle. The music room where Margaret had first caught Rosa playing late at night became known as the Rosa Martinez Practice Room. A small plaque by the door reminded everyone who entered that talent can be found anywhere, and that it is our responsibility to recognize and nurture it with respect and kindness. Both women had learned that the most beautiful music comes not just from technical skill, but from understanding, compassion, and the courage to see the worth in every human being.